What you're about to hear is not a slow news cycle. This is Cowboys Nation operating in the final hours before one of the most consequential draft weekends this franchise has faced in a decade, and every single story breaking right now carries weight. There is a cornerback visit happening at the Star that is generating real buzz across the league, and the full picture behind it is considerably more layered than the surface-level headline suggests. There is a linebacker trade that never truly went away and could explode back into the conversation on draft night inside Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. A Pro Bowl nickel corner is available via trade. The fit with what Dallas is building could not be more logical, and the Cowboys might represent the single most sensible landing spot in the entire league. And there is an edge rusher projection deep into day two that every single person in this fan base needs to understand before the picks start flying Thursday night. The board is fully set. The clock is ticking. The decisions are coming whether this front office is ready or not. Welcome to Cowboys Reality Check. I'm Nick. Let's get into every piece of this before Pittsburgh changes everything. Start with Jermaine McCoy, because his situation has taken a turn that nobody saw coming as recently as 48 hours ago. McCoy is now scheduled for a top 30 visit with the Dallas Cowboys, and the real question pulsing through Cowboys Nation is whether this front office is genuinely serious about him as a first-round target or whether this is the kind of pre-draft smokescreen that Jerry Jones has turned into an art form over the decades. ESPN's Todd Archer, one of the most plugged-in reporters covering this franchise, confirmed the visit, and in doing so pushed the total number of cornerbacks who have either already met with Dallas or will before draft night to 7. 7 cornerbacks on the top 30 list. Take a moment and sit with that number, because it is not a coincidence and it is not organizational sloppiness. That is a franchise that has clearly, urgently, and without apology acknowledged that its secondary requires significant reconstruction before this team has any business competing for a playoff spot. 7 visits means no stone is being left unturned. No prospect is being dismissed without a conversation, and no position on this defense is being taken more seriously in the pre-draft process. Now here is where the McCoy situation becomes genuinely complicated, because his path to this point is unlike virtually anyone else in this draft class. McCoy missed the entirety of the 2025 college football season after suffering a torn ACL in January of that year. He never participated at the Senior Bowl. He never worked out at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. For months, he was essentially invisible to the pre-draft evaluation process, completely off the radar of most teams building their boards and funneling resources into their top 30 visit lists. And then March happened. His pro day arrived at the end of the month, and what McCoy delivered in that single afternoon erased the question marks so aggressively that the entire cornerback conversation for this draft class was forced to recalibrate around him. Todd McShay of The Ringer called it the most anticipated pro day of the entire pre-draft cycle. McCoy answered with a 4.38 40-yard dash. He posted a 38-inch vertical leap. His broad jump measured 10 feet and 7 inches. Those are elite numbers in a vacuum. Those are extraordinary numbers for a player coming off a torn ACL who had not played competitive football in over a year. Pro Football Focus responded by rating him as the 17th overall player in this entire draft class and the second-best cornerback available to teams picking in round 1. The complication for Dallas has been spoken about openly and at length. Jerry Jones made his position clear earlier in this draft cycle, and he did not leave any wiggle room in how he communicated it. There are no redshirt years for incoming rookies on this roster. The Cowboys need players who are ready to contribute from their very first NFL training camp, not players who need a year of development time and careful management to get their bodies back to full functionality after a major surgical procedure. Nick Harris of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram reported earlier in the week that McCoy was not expected to be in Dallas's genuine consideration set, specifically because of that injury history and the organizational mandate around immediate readiness. Harris went further and indicated the Cowboys' position had not shifted following the pro day performance. And yet here we are. The visit is scheduled. Something changed in that evaluation room, because top 30 visits are not handed out casually, and they are not handed out to players a franchise has no real interest in. Resources are limited, time is compressed, and every visit carries meaning. The most logical explanation, when you examine the full landscape of what Dallas is facing at pick 12, is the cornerback board itself. Mansour Delane is almost universally projected to be off the board before the Cowboys come on the clock in the first round. In a draft cycle where Dallas has openly prioritized corner, losing the consensus top player at the position before pick 12 means everything shifts down one. If Delane is gone, McCoy becomes the best available cornerback in the class. He becomes the only remaining option at that tier of the position. A player cleared to play, 17 months removed from the ACL reconstruction, running a 4.38 at his pro day, and graded as a top 20 prospect by the most sophisticated analytical platform in the sport, becomes a very different conversation than he was when the injury news was fresh and his pro day had not yet happened. Cowboys Nation is genuinely divided on this one, and both sides of that divide have legitimate standing. The knee concern is real. The missed time is real. The developmental question mark is real. But the talent level is also real. And if his front office has done its medical due diligence and arrived at confidence about his physical recovery, then passing on the second-best corner in this draft class because of institutional hesitation around the injury could be the kind of decision that haunts this franchise's secondary construction for the next 4 years. Patrick Queen has never fully exited this conversation, and draft night in Pittsburgh might be precisely when that trade comes roaring back into the picture with full force. Steelers Depot's Dave Bryan mapped out the specific scenario this week in detail that deserves serious attention from anyone invested in how Dallas navigates this draft. The framework Bryan laid out goes like this. If the Cowboys reach pick 12 and find that the linebacker or safety they were targeting in the first round is already gone, specifically if Sonny Styles has been taken off the board, and Dallas is left staring at a landscape where none of their prioritized targets remain available, Jerry Jones could pivot decisively and execute a trade back in the first round structured around bringing Queen to Dallas. The mechanics Bryan outlined have the Pittsburgh Steelers sending Queen and the 21st overall selection to the Cowboys, potentially with a third-round pick attached to the package, in exchange for Dallas moving back from 12. That outcome gives the Cowboys a proven starting linebacker already operating at the NFL level plus 2 picks in the back half of round 1 at positions 2021. That is not a consolation outcome. That is actually a fascinating and legitimately productive result if the board goes sideways on Thursday night and the Cowboys find themselves without a clear direction at the top of their target list. The history between Dallas and this particular trade is important context. The Cowboys did not express passive or peripheral interest in Queen during free agency. Both Calvin Watkins of the Dallas Morning News and Nick Harris of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram reported in detail that Dallas was pursuing this trade aggressively during the first week of the league year, with Harris specifically noting that a deal appeared imminent at one point in those negotiations. It never materialized. Pittsburgh cooled. Adam Schefter reported the Steelers were not genuinely interested in moving Queen at that time, and the entire conversation gradually faded from the daily news cycle. But organizational interest does not simply disappear because a deal did not close in the first week of free agency. It waits. It recalibrates. And draft night, when the Steelers might be actively looking to move up from 21 to acquire specific offensive linemen like guard Vega Ione or a receiver target like Mekhi Lavin, could represent exactly the kind of leverage moment that brings a dormant conversation back to life with urgency on both sides. Let's be completely direct about where Queen fits in what Dallas is trying to build, because the roster context makes this more compelling than any individual trade scenario can capture in isolation. The Cowboys finished dead last in points allowed across the entire league last season, 30th in yards surrendered. The linebacker position has been the single most glaring and persistently unaddressed hole on this roster throughout the entire offseason, and the team enters draft week without a proven answer at the position. Queen is a proven starter. He's been in big games, held his own in a demanding conference, and brings the combination of athleticism and reliability that this defense has been missing at the second level. Bringing him in alongside picks at 20 and 21 gives this front office linebacker stability, plus 2 genuine shots at impact players in the first round. The limiting factor remains Pittsburgh's cooperation. Without the Steelers' active participation in moving Queen, this entire scenario stays in the theoretical column. But if that board truly collapses and Dallas finds itself at pick 12 without a clean path to their highest priority targets, Queen suddenly becomes the single most important phone call Jerry Jones makes across the entire weekend. 2 directions. 2 genuinely different outcomes for this draft. Take the swing on McCoy in the first round and invest in a cornerback with elite measurables and a legitimate injury concern. Or trade back, absorb the Queen package, and address the linebacker crisis with a proven starter while picking up an extra first-round selection. Which move actually changes this defense more by the time September arrives? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And do not hold back, because the Cowboys faithful have earned the right to have this argument loudly. Like this video if you believe Dallas needs to find a way to do both, because what is coming next in this conversation involve a Pro Bowl nickel corner who is available via trade and a destination fit that makes almost too much sense to ignore. Kenny Moore, too, is on the market, and the Cowboys need to be paying serious and immediate attention to what the Indianapolis Colts are prepared to offer. Indianapolis has agreed to seek a trade partner for their Pro Bowl nickel corner, who has 1 year remaining on the 3-year, $30 million extension he signed back in March of 2024. The fit with what first-year defensive coordinator Christian Parker is constructing in this secondary is difficult to look at rationally and dismiss, because Moore brings exactly the combination of proven production, physical toughness, and veteran credibility that this unit has been missing. Pro Football Focus graded Moore at 66.7 overall in the 2025 season, a number that represents functional, consistent production across a full year of starting work. His run defense grade of 84.4 ranked 5th among all cornerbacks in the entire league. He posted 41 tackles, added an interception, and demonstrated the kind of aggressive slot physicality that the Cowboys have genuinely lacked at that position for multiple seasons now. 21 career interceptions for return for touchdowns. This is not a declining veteran being shuffled out of Indianapolis for salary cap relief. This is a productive, physical, and proven starter who happens to be available at precisely the moment Dallas needs exactly what he provides. The backstory on Moore adds a dimension to this acquisition target that goes beyond the statistical profile. He stayed home and played college football at Valdosta State, an NCAA Division II program, earning 2 All-American selections at a level where scouts rarely direct their most intensive evaluation resources. He went undrafted in 2017. The New England Patriots signed him and then released him during final roster cuts before the regular season. He landed in Indianapolis, worked his way into a starting role by his second year in the league, and never relinquished it. 8 seasons as a starter. A Pro Bowl selection in 2021. Built from absolute zero into one of the most reliable and respected nickel corners the Colts have had in their modern history. That kind of mentality, the mentality of someone who was told repeatedly that he did not belong and found ways to prove every evaluation wrong, is not something you can manufacture in a locker room. It either walks through the door or it does not. And right now the Cowboys have an opportunity to open that door. Dallas already brought in Kobe Durant on a 1-year deal, and Durant carries some functional experience in the slot. But Moore operates at a categorically different level of proven production at that position, and the distinction matters when you're talking about a secondary that ranked among the most exploitable in the entire league last season. The Cowboys carry 2 first-round selections and meaningful remaining cap space entering this draft weekend, which means the cost of a trade to acquire Moore does not have to be structurally prohibitive. 1 year remaining on his contract keeps the long-term commitment manageable and gives Parker a legitimate and credentialed veteran presence in the slot during exactly the window when the younger corners on this roster need time and guidance to develop. The secondary has functioned as a budget-destroying exercise in misallocated investment for this franchise. Trayvon Diggs at $97.6 million. Darren Bland at $90 million. Both investments unraveling in different ways and on different timelines. Moore represents the philosophical opposite of that approach. Affordable, proven, physical, available right now. Cowboys Nation has watched this secondary absorb catastrophic performances in back-to-back seasons. Kenny Moore, too, walking through the doors at the Star in Frisco, changes the calculus of what this unit can realistically be in 2026, and the opportunity deserves to be pursued with the same urgency this front office brought to the Queen trade discussions in March. Now let's talk about Anthony Lucas, because this pick deserves dramatically more attention from this fan base than it is currently generating, and that gap between the volume of coverage and the potential significance of the selection is exactly the kind of inefficiency that separates teams who build effectively in the middle rounds from teams that reach the third day of the draft without a clear direction. The Athletic's latest mock draft projects the Cowboys selecting Lucas, the 6'5", 256-pound edge rusher out of USC, at the 92nd overall selection. When you dig into what Lucas actually brings to this roster and cross-reference it against what Dallas desperately needs at the position, the projection starts making real sense. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com offered an assessment that acknowledged the limitations directly and without softening. Raw, limited production volume during his college career. Not the most explosive athlete off the line of scrimmage at the point of attack. Occasional hesitation in his game when he is processing multiple responsibilities simultaneously. Those are legitimate concerns, and nobody operating in good faith should pretend otherwise when evaluating a Day 2 prospect with this particular profile. But here is what the tape also shows when you look past the production numbers and engage with the physical reality of what this player brings to the position. Elite size for the edge rusher spot. A wingspan measured at 7 feet. The kind of raw athletic infrastructure that defensive line coaches with real development track records can construct an actual pass rusher around if the coaching and scheme align correctly. USA Today's Micah Huff specifically identified Lucas as one of the genuine sleepers in this draft class, pointing to that size and athletic potential as the foundation for a player who could become a legitimate problem for opposing offensive tackles if the right development environment surrounds him. The key phrase in Huff's assessment is the right coaching staff. And that brings us back to what Parker is building in Dallas, and whether this defensive staff is equipped to unlock what Lucas could eventually become. Edge rusher has not simply been a priority for the Cowboys heading into Pittsburgh. It has been the explicit first priority. ESPN's Todd Archer reported that when the Cowboys convened their official draft meetings with the entire brain trust in the room, scouts, position coaches, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, Will McClay, and head coach Brian Schottenheimer all assembled and working through the board together, the very first position group discussed was edge players. The first conversation. That detail is not granular organizational trivia. That is a direct window into where this franchise's most urgent roster concern is concentrated heading into the most important 48 hours of their offseason. Dallas already has Rashawn Gary. They have Donovan Wilson. The front office is not operating under the illusion that those two players represent a complete and sustainable edge rush solution for a defense that needs to become functional again. They need depth. They need developmental upside. They need players who can grow into meaningful roles before this roster needs them to carry the pass rush. Peter Schrager of ESPN projects 5 edge rushers going inside the first round of this draft, which means the position carries real depth that extends meaningfully into Day 2 and Day 3. If Dallas allocates both of its first-round selections to addressing the defensive priorities at the top of the board, Lucas at 92 becomes the under-the-radar addition that quietly and substantively strengthens the most important position on this defense, without requiring premium draft currency to acquire. What keeps coming back to the surface when evaluating Lucas honestly is this. The size is real, the wingspan is real, and Christian Parker is precisely the kind of defensive coordinator who has demonstrated a capacity for taking physically gifted but technically raw edge players and extracting functional production from them within a reasonable developmental timeline. Third-round picks are not finished products. Third-round picks are raw materials. You're not drafting a player who walks in and immediately changes your pass rush identity. You're drafting a player with the physical tools and football character to grow into that role across 2 or 3 seasons. If Lucas brings the coachability and the competitive drive to complement what he already offers physically, Oxnard might be the beginning of a developmental story that Cowboys Nation is not yet prepared to appreciate. Pittsburgh cannot arrive fast enough. Every single piece of this draft puzzle is moving simultaneously, and the hours between now and the moment Roger Goodell steps to that podium represent the last window Dallas has to position itself for the decisions that will define this defense for the next several seasons. McCoy's visit to the Star fundamentally altered the cornerback conversation for this franchise and introduced a legitimate first-round swing candidate that most evaluators had written off before the pro day performance changed everything. Queen is sitting by the phone on draft night, and if that board collapses in the first 12 picks, the conversation that nearly produced a trade in March gets a second life in Pittsburgh with genuine urgency on both sides. Kenny Moore, too, is available for acquisition right now, today before the draft even begins, and this secondary needs exactly what he brings in terms of physical slot coverage, run defense toughness, and veteran leadership. And Anthony Lucas in the 3rd round could be the sleeper that the rest of the league completely overlooked while this franchise quietly solved its most persistent roster problem